South Africa's leading gold miners are facing a potential lawsuit on behalf of thousands of workers who claim they contracted the lung disease silicosis through the company's negligence. The first papers were filed today against AngloGold Ashanti, Goldfields and Harmony Gold, mining against those companies, and this is in a preliminary step to determine whether the court recognises the case as a class action. Charles Abrahams is a senior partner at Abrahams Kivitz Attorneys, in studio with us now to discuss the matter. Welcome, Charles. So from what I understand, Charles, that you would be representing these 300 former miners.
Well, yes, indeed. So let me just clarify that it is estimated that there are about between 350 to 500,000 former miners scattered across southern Africa who may suffer from occupational lung diseases such as silicosis, tuberculosis, lung cancer, and various other forms of diseases.
So presumably it's not just in gold mining either, it would be more broadly spread?
No. This is in gold mining because
yeah.
Silicosis, as you would know, is obviously a disease contracted in gold mines.
Okay.
And the three companies whom these miners, or most of these miners worked are AngloGold Ashanti, Goldfields Limited and Harmony Gold Mining Companies, and of course through the various operations over the many years.
I see the media tried to speak to some of these mining bosses, most of whom didn't want to comment. One of them feels that there isn't really a case. You, as a representative of these miners, presumably feel very strongly about it. So just build this case for us.
Well, I think one's got to look at take a step back and look at a case that was brought about 6 years ago against AngloGold Ashanti. It was a single case, where myself and another colleague, Richard Spoor, were involved in, and it was essentially a case challenging AngloGold on behalf of this one particular miner who contracted occupational lung disease. AngloGold Ashanti at the time maintained that it could not be held liable because they have paid statutory levies to the compensation fund, and so as a result the matter went to court. Started out in the South Gauteng court. And the court actually agreed with AngloGold Ashanti that there is a bar on miners, from instituting litigation directly against, the employers, because they're entitled to statutory compensation. That matter went to the Supreme Court of Appeal, and that court also agreed with, the lower court. We took the matter up to the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court, in a unanimous decision, said that that is not the case. In fact, there is no statutory bar on any mine worker who had contracted, lung diseases arising out of, his or her work, in a mine, from instituting, proceedings, against a mining company. So the net effect of that is that it has opened
the door, right?
It has opened the door, and so if we look at, potentially 500,000, miners, for single cases to be brought, before South African court, it will effectively paralyze, the entire court system.
So that's the court system, but from an investment perspective, it's the other. I mean, one has huge sympathy with people who've become sick and disabled as a result of claimed negligence. On the other hand, what does it mean for the company, the longevity of the company, and for shareholders? In your opinion, how big could these financial claims be?
Well, I think it is, if the certification is granted, if summonses are issued, and if we get beyond the step of what we call declaratory relief, where the court is to determine on common issues, both factual and legal. If we are successful on that, then of course we will then be into the arena of each and every miner having to prove to the court, exactly the damages that they have suffered, because damages are essentially an individualized, aspect. But the potential is huge. But we must also bear in mind that over the many years, the mining companies have, unfortunately, externalized those costs onto the public in health, and the public health system has unfortunately failed these miners. And today we see those miners in the rural areas have absolutely no support. In fact, even the health systems in those rural areas, and even in these in the SADC countries, Southern African countries, there absolutely no support. So we say from that point of view, unfortunately, if once see the externalization of those costs, then you've got to look at that twin side as well.
Ashraf, your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, it's a very tricky one, because my question to Charles is, from which year do you start? Is it miners going back through to the 70s, 90s, etc.? Because it's almost mining companies can sometimes make the claim that they weren't aware of these respiratory diseases until much later on. So there was no opportunity for provision or putting safety measures in place.
Okay. There are two legs to your to the question. One is the knowledge. To the contrary, the knowledge has been around for more than 100 years. The Chamber of Mines, have been involved in numerous studies. In fact, the Chamber of Mines has been the very first to recognize, the scale of the disease since 1902. We've had various commissions, starting with the Welders, Commission, and then we've had, various international conferences, the pneumoconiosis, conferences. In fact, 3 or 4 of those, international conferences took place in South Africa. So the knowledge of the mining companies has been very, very clear. They've been acutely aware, of the disease, of these diseases, in the mines. And they've also been aware of, the technology that, existed, at the time. And at the time we had, for instance, in the United Kingdom, in the coal mines, various technologies, were applied, in those mines, and they will be able to eradicate, silicosis. We have the Chamber of Mines in their own reports on record, basically saying that unfortunately these technologies are expensive. So the knowledge is there. So I don't think that the mining companies, can say that, we did not know. The second leg of your question is, of course, the issue around, where do you start? Of course, we're looking at miners who are alive. And so, and so we'll be looking at the duration of, when, they were employed, at those particular companies. We are, of course, acutely aware that the mining companies, a lot of the mines have changed hands. And it is an issue which, we have, considered, and we've addressed it, to, as best, as possible.